The great palace of Queen Zarina stood like a mountain of black stone under the light of two suns. Its tall spires shone with silver edges, and its gates were guarded by alien warriors in polished armor. The palace was not only a home, but also a symbol of the queen's power. No one dared to enter without fear, and no prisoner left without shame. On this day, however, something unusual was happening. The guards dragged a human warrior across the marble floor of the grand hall. His name was Darren. His wrists were bound by glowing chains that burned against his skin, yet his face held no fear. He had been captured during the defense of a human colony on the edge of alien territory. The Queen's soldiers had expected him to beg for his life, but instead, he walked tall even as they pulled him forward. Hundreds of alien nobles gathered inside the hall. They wore flowing robes decorated with crystals, their eyes glowing with pale light. They looked down on Darren as if he was nothing more than a broken animal. Murmurs filled the chamber, voices filled with disdain. "A human brought before the Queen," one whispered. "How far they have fallen." Another sneered, "This creature thinks he can fight against our empire." The throne at the far end of the hall rose above all others. Upon it sat Queen Zarina, her form regal and cold. Her skin shimmered like polished metal, and her crown curved into sharp points. Her eyes glowed with a hard violet light that could pierce the strongest heart. She lifted one hand, and silence fell across the hall. "So this is the human warrior they speak of," the Queen said, her voice echoing across the chamber. "The one who dared resist my armies. They say he fought fiercely, but now look at him. Chains on his wrists, knees in the dust. Humanity is nothing but a fragile shadow." The crowd laughed at her words. Some clapped their hands in amusement, while others hissed in approval. The Queen's voice held power, and her subjects adored the cruelty hidden within her tone. Yet Darren did not bow his head. He raised his eyes and looked directly at the Queen. His gaze was calm, steady, and filled with quiet strength. "I fought because I had to," Darren said, his voice clear. "Not for glory, not for power. I fought to protect my people. If that makes me weak in your eyes, then so be it. But weakness is not what you see standing before you." The hall erupted in angry cries. "How dare a human speak so boldly before their queen?" Guards struck him across the shoulder, forcing him down, but Darren still kept his eyes on Zarina. He would not give her the victory of fear. Queen Zarina tilted her head. For a moment, her lips curled into something close to a smile, though it carried no warmth. "You speak well for one so low," she said. "Perhaps your kind has some courage after all. But courage without strength is meaningless. You cannot stand against the Empire. You cannot defy me." "I already have," Darren replied. The Queen's eyes narrowed, and the crowd gasped. No one had ever spoken to her with such boldness, yet she did not strike him down. Instead, she rose from her throne and descended the steps slowly, each movement filled with elegance and menace. She circled him as if he were prey trapped in a cage. "Do you believe your bravery matters?" she asked. "Do you think your actions can change the stars? You are nothing but one man. Your species is scattered. Your colonies burn. What future can humanity hope for?" Darren met her gaze without trembling. "The future is not written by thrones or crowns," he said. "It is written by those who refuse to surrender. Even if I fall, others will rise. You can crush one warrior, but not the spirit of my people." The nobles hissed in rage. The guards moved forward, eager to silence him, but the Queen raised her hand and they stopped. For a moment the hall grew silent. Her violet eyes studied him carefully, as if searching for something hidden beneath his words. Then, with a sudden laugh, she turned away. "Interesting," she said as she walked back to her throne. "The human has spirit, but spirit is useless here. He will not entertain me further. Guards, remove this creature from my sight." Cast him into the streets of my city. Let him see what becomes of those who think they can stand against me. He is not worth the honor of chains within my palace." The guards dragged Darren across the hall. The nobles laughed and cheered, pleased by the queen's command. To them, it was a fitting end. The human had dared to stand proud, and now he was to be thrown into the cold streets like a beggar. But even as he was dragged through the great doors and cast into the alien city beyond, Darren did not lower his head. He stumbled against the stone road, the chains falling away as the guards released him. Behind him, the gates closed with a heavy sound, shutting him out of the palace. The city stretched before him, vast and filled with towering buildings that touched the sky. Strange lights glowed from every corner, and alien citizens walked the streets, each giving him a look of contempt. To them, he was not a warrior, but a defeated enemy. Some spat as he passed, others laughed cruelly. Children pointed at him as if he were some broken relic. Darren stood tall despite their scorn. He had lost the battle, but not his resolve. His eyes scanned the city, noticing the order of the guards, the fear in the eyes of the workers, and the silence of those who dared not speak too loud. Where the queen saw only her own glory, Darren saw cracks in her empire. He whispered to himself, not as a vow of revenge, but as a quiet promise. "You think you have broken me, but this is not the end. This is only the beginning." As the twin suns sank lower, the human warrior began to walk deeper into the alien city. He carried no weapon, no army, and no allies, yet his heart carried a strength greater than all the glittering walls of the queen's palace. For while Queen Zarina had expelled him with scorn, she had unknowingly set into motion a chain of events that would shake her empire. And the warrior who walked alone through the alien streets would soon become the spark that changed everything. The gates of the palace closed behind Darren with a heavy sound that echoed in the air. He stood on the wide stone road, surrounded by tall towers of black metal that rose high into the clouds. Strange lights glowed on the sides of buildings, shifting in colors that seemed alive. The city of the alien empire was vast, filled with activity, and filled with scorn for anyone who did not belong. The people of the city looked at Darren with open hatred. They were tall, with skin that shone, faintly under the twin suns. Their eyes glowed pale, and their movements carried pride. To them, he was not a warrior, but a symbol of weakness. They pointed at him, whispered insults in their sharp tongue, and laughed at the sight of a human walking free yet unwanted. Some alien children threw small stones toward him, giggling as they ran away. Others spat on the ground as he passed. No one offered kindness, and no one saw him as anything but a defeated enemy. Darren kept walking, his back straight and his eyes calm. He did not answer their laughter, nor did he show anger. He had seen worse during war. The streets stretched in every direction, crowded with vendors, workers, and guards. Soldiers stood on every corner, their polished armor reflecting the sun. They watched him carefully, hands on their weapons, ready to strike if he caused trouble. Darren knew one mistake would cost him his life. Yet he walked forward without fear. His mind was sharp, observing everything around him. He noticed how the workers moved quickly, heads lowered, never daring to look the guards in the eye. He saw how the nobles passed in shining carriages, pushing others aside without care. The difference between the rulers and the common people was clear. Power rested in the hands of a few, while the many lived in silence. As Darren reached a market square, the smell of strange foods filled the air. Vendors shouted, trying to sell fruits that glowed softly and meat that sizzled on hot stones. The crowd was thick, but it parted slightly around him. Some were too disgusted to stand near a human, while others simply feared drawing the attention of the guards. One guard shoved him aside with the edge of a spear. "Stay out of the way, creature," the soldier said with a sneer. "You walk, Only because the Queen allows it. Do not think yourself free." Darren looked at the soldier but said nothing. He had learned long ago that words meant little to those drunk on power. Instead, he kept walking, silently counting the number of guards, the positions of towers, and the movement of the crowd. Every detail mattered. Every weakness could one day be useful. He walked until his legs grew tired, and finally he sat on the edge of a broken wall near the outskirts of the city. The noise of the market faded, replaced by the quiet hum of factories. Strange machines moved in endless rhythm, pouring smoke into the air. Workers filed in and out, their faces pale and tired. Here, Darren noticed something different. The workers looked less proud than the nobles, less cruel than the guards. Their eyes carried shadows of fear, but also something else, something close to weariness. They were strong, yet they bowed their heads as if their strength belonged to someone else. One worker, an older alien with cracks on his skin, glanced at Darren. The man quickly looked away when a guard passed, but Darren caught the brief moment of recognition. It was not kindness, but it was not hatred either. It was curiosity. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with red light. Darren searched for shelter, and he found an abandoned building with half its roof missing. It was empty, except for broken crates and a rusted machine that no longer worked. He settled inside, resting against the wall. His body was tired, but his mind was awake. He thought of Queen Zarina's words in the palace. She had called him weak, had thrown him into the streets to be mocked. Yet as he sat in the broken shelter, he realized she had given him something greater than chains. She had given him freedom to see her empire from within. Darren whispered to himself, his voice steady. "You think this is my defeat. But you have shown me more than you know. You have shown me the cracks in your throne." The night came slowly. The city glowed with blue lights that spread across the streets, casting long shadows. The noise of the day faded, replaced by distant echoes of guards marching and the quiet hum of machines that never slept. As Darren closed his eyes for rest, footsteps approached the shelter. He opened them quickly, ready to defend himself with nothing but his fists if needed. A small figure entered, a young alien girl carrying a basket of broken bread. She stopped when she saw him. Her eyes widened with fear, and she almost ran, but Darren raised his hand slowly, showing no threat. "I will not harm you," he said in a calm voice. The girl looked at him for a long moment, then placed the basket on the ground and hurried away without a word. Darren stared at the bread. It was old and dry, yet it was food. Someone had left it for him, even if only out of pity. He ate quietly, his thoughts deep. Not all in this city were cruel. Some, even if small in number, still carried sparks of kindness or doubt, and doubt was the beginning of change. When the twin moons rose high, Darren finally allowed sleep to take him. The hard floor was no comfort, the night air was cold, but his spirit remained unbroken. For in the broken streets of the alien capital, the human warrior had seen more than mockery. He had seen fear in the workers, cracks in the empire, and the first faint signs that not all hearts belonged to the Queen. What Queen Zarina believed was exile was, in truth, the first step of something far greater. The streets that mocked him today would one day whisper his name with respect. The morning sun rose over the alien city, its twin lights spilling across towers of black metal and long roads lined with banners of the Queen's rule. The city seemed proud, but Darren had already seen the cracks behind the shining walls. He rose from his broken shelter, stretched his weary arms, and began walking once more through the streets. The day was alive with the sound of workers moving to the factories. Long lines of men and women marched silently while guards watched them from high platforms. Nobles passed by in shining vehicles, ignoring the tired faces around them. Darren walked among the crowd, his steps steady, his eyes sharp. He saw the same fear and silence as before. The workers did not look at one another. They kept their heads down, afraid of being punished for a glance or a whisper. Yet Darren felt something stirring beneath the surface. Oppression never lasted forever. Somewhere, deep within these people, there had to be a will to stand. As he walked, a voice called softly from an alley. "You should not be here." Darren turned and saw a young woman, her skin pale with faint silver lines running across her arms. Her clothes were simple, worn from long labor. Her eyes glowed softly, but not with pride or cruelty like the nobles. Instead, they carried a shadow of sadness. Darren stopped. "Do you speak to me?" "Yes," she said, stepping forward quickly, glancing around to make sure no guards were close. "You should leave this part of the city. The guards are cruel. They will not allow you to walk freely here." Darren studied her face. "You do not spit on me as the others do." The woman's lips tightened. "I was once a servant in the palace. I saw how the queen treated my family. We were cast out when she no longer found use for us. Since then, I have lived here among the workers. My name is Mira." Darren nodded. "I am Darren." She lowered her voice. "I know who you are, the human warrior who stood before the queen without fear. Some laugh at you, but others whisper about your courage. They say you looked her in the eye and did not bow." Darren felt the weight of her words. Already his presence had stirred whispers. Do they whisper with hope or with fear? "Both," Mira admitted. "Most are afraid. The Queen's power is great, but some of us, we wonder if your defiance means there is still strength left in the galaxy beyond her throne." Darren saw the doubt in her eyes, but also a spark. It was small, fragile, yet real. "Strength is not always found in armies or weapons," he said gently. "Sometimes it begins with one voice refusing to stay silent, one step taken when others remain still. That is how hope grows." Mira hesitated, then looked around again. "Follow me. It is not safe to speak here." She led him through narrow alleys where broken walls leaned over piles of discarded metal. The noise of the market faded behind them until they reached a small room hidden beneath a collapsed roof. Inside were a few workers sitting quietly around a dim lamp. Their eyes widened when they saw Darren. "You brought him here?" one of them asked Mira, fear in his voice. "He is not an enemy," Mira said firmly. "He is the one the Queen expelled. If he is willing to speak, we should listen." The workers looked uneasy, but no one stopped her. Darren stepped forward, his voice calm but steady. "I know you fear the Queen. I have seen how her guards watch every step you take. I have seen how nobles treat you as shadows in your own city. But I have also seen something else. I have seen strength in your hands, in your eyes, even if you do not yet see it yourselves." One worker shook his head. "Strength means nothing. We are many, yes, but unarmed. They have soldiers, weapons, and the Queen's will. We have only our labor." Darren's gaze did not waver. "And yet, it is your labor that keeps this city alive. Without you, the machines do not move. Without you, the streets grow empty. Without you, the Queen's throne is weaker than she admits. Do you not see? You are the foundation of her empire." The room grew silent. The workers exchanged uneasy glances. No one had ever spoken to them like this. Mira broke the silence. "He is right. We are the strength she hides beneath her crown. If we stand together, even she will feel it." "But what can we do?" another worker whispered. "One wrong word and we vanish. One wrong step and our families suffer." Darren looked around the room, his eyes burning with quiet resolve. "You do not need to fight with weapons. Not yet. You need only to remember who you are. Stand tall when you walk. Speak kindly to one another when the guards are not watching. Share courage as you share bread. These are small acts, but they grow. And when the time comes, you will already know what it feels like to stand united. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the older worker who had seen Darren near the factories the night before nodded slowly. Perhaps the human is right. Perhaps hope begins small. Mira's face softened with the first true smile Darren had seen in this city. Then we begin today. They spoke quietly for some time, planning only small steps. No rebellion, no war, only acts of unity and silent strength. It was fragile, yet it was a beginning. When Darren left the hidden room, the suns were setting again, painting the sky with red and gold. Mira walked beside him for a short distance before turning back toward the workers. You have given them something they did not have before, she said softly. You have given them the thought that they are not alone. Darren nodded. That is the first step. Hope is stronger than chains. As he walked back through the streets, he noticed something different. The workers still kept their heads low, but now some glanced at him not with scorn, but with curiosity. A few even held their shoulders straighter as they passed. The Queen believed she had broken him by casting him out, but in truth she had given him a place where his voice mattered more than her crown. The spark had been lit, and though it was small, Darren knew a single spark could one day set fire to the stars. The next morning arrived with the sound of factory bells. Workers poured into the streets, their faces pale from sleepless nights, their hands rough from endless labor. The guards watched them with cold eyes, ready to strike at the first sign of disobedience. To most, it was another day of survival. To Darren, it was the beginning of something greater. He had spent the night thinking. The whispers in Mira's hidden room had been small, fragile, and filled with fear. Yet he knew that such whispers could grow if guided with care. The Queen had cast him into the city to humiliate him, but she had unknowingly given him freedom, to plant seeds of resistance. Darren walked among the workers as they moved toward the factories. He carried no weapon, no armor, yet his presence drew quiet looks. Some remembered his words from the night before. Others only knew him as the human who had spoken boldly in the palace. Whatever they believed, he was no longer invisible. At the edge of the factory gates, he stopped and raised his voice just enough for those nearby to hear. Your strength builds this city. Do not forget that. Every stone, every machine, every light comes from your hands. You are not shadows. You are the foundation. A guard shouted and shoved him away, striking his shoulder with the shaft of a spear. Darren stumbled but did not fall. The workers lowered their eyes, afraid. Yet he noticed a few holding his words quietly in their hearts as they entered the factory. Later that day, Mira found him sitting near the broken shelter. She carried a small jug of water and a thin cloth of bread. She set them beside him and whispered, "The guards grow suspicious. If you keep speaking in public, they will strike you down." They can strike me, Darren said calmly, but they cannot strike every voice that rises, if even one remembers. Then the seed has been planted. Mira studied him carefully. You do not act like the others I have seen. Many who resist seek revenge or blood. You speak of patience and unity. Why? Darren looked toward the towers of the palace in the distance. Because revenge dies quickly, but unity lives. A sword can win a battle. A people can win a future. Mira fell silent. She could not deny the weight of his words. That evening, Darren gathered the small group, again in the hidden room. This time, more workers had come. They sat in silence at first, afraid of being overheard, but their eyes held curiosity. Darren spoke slowly, his voice steady. You fear the Queen because she holds weapons, soldiers, and power. But what you do not see is that she fears you as well. Why else does she place guards on every corner? Why else does she silence even a whisper? She fears what would happen if you remembered your strength." One young worker clenched his fists. "What can we do? We have no weapons." "You have your minds," Darren said. "You have your hands. You have each other. Begin small. Share food when one goes hungry. Watch for each other when guards approach. Do not allow cruelty to divide you. A single hand can be broken, but many hands joined cannot." The room grew thoughtful. For the first time, the workers spoke not only of fear, but of possibility. Over the next days, Darren watched as small changes appeared. Workers began greeting one another quietly instead of walking in silence. They passed food to those with none. They warned each other when guards drew near. The changes were small, almost invisible, but Darren saw the beginning of unity. One afternoon, a group of guards entered the factory yard and demanded extra labor without pay. Usually the workers would obey in silence, but this time, something different happened. A man stepped forward and said calmly, "We have already given what was demanded. We cannot give more." The guards raised their weapons, ready to punish him, but several others stepped beside him. They did not fight, but they stood together, shoulders straight. The guards shouted, but the sight of many refusing to bow unsettled them. After a moment, they left with curses, their threats empty. Darren watched from the shadows. His plan was working. Unity was beginning to form. That night, Mira met him again. Her voice carried a mixture of fear and wonder. "Do you see what is happening? The people are changing. They stand taller now. Even when afraid, they look at the guards differently." Darren nodded. "The Queen believes strength is measured in swords and crowns. She does not understand that true strength grows from the ground up. These people have carried her empire for too long. Now they are learning to carry themselves." But Mira's expression darkened. "The Queen will not stay blind forever. She will hear of this. She will strike harder than before." Darren's eyes remained steady. "Then we must be ready. Not with weapons, but with discipline. A people united can outlast armies. We will show them not how to destroy, but how to endure." The days turned into weeks. Darren taught the workers simple signals to warn each other, ways to move supplies in secret, and methods to stand firm without violence. He told them stories of human colonies that had survived against impossible odds, not because of weapons, but because they refused to surrender their spirit. The people listened, and they learned. Where once they walked with bent heads, now they began to lift their eyes. Where once they whispered in fear, now they spoke in quiet confidence. Hope was spreading, silent, but unstoppable. Yet the guards were not blind. Rumors reached the palace. Queen's Arena's council spoke of unrest in the factories. Some laughed, dismissing it as nothing more than tired workers, but others warned that something dangerous was stirring. The Queen listened in silence, her violet eyes narrowing. "Unrest does not grow by itself," she said coldly. "Someone is planting these thoughts. Find him." Back in the city, Darren felt the pressure tightening. More guards appeared on the streets. Punishments grew harsher. But the people did not break. Each time the Queen tried to crush their spirit, they held each other stronger. One night, as Darren sat in the broken shelter, Mira came to him again. Her eyes glowed in the pale light. "They follow you now, Darren. Even those who have never spoken to you walk taller because of your presence. The Queen will soon see you as more than a nuisance. She will see you as a threat." Darren looked out across the city, his expression calm yet firm. "Then let her see. For I do not fight with swords. I fight with hope, and hope cannot be exiled." The city around them glowed with alien lights, but beneath that glow something new was rising. Quietly, silently, a plan was unfolding. A plan not of destruction, but of unity. And at its heart stood a human warrior who had been cast out in shame, yet now carried the strength to shake an empire. The city was restless. For weeks, small acts of defiance had spread through the streets and factories. Workers no longer bent as low when guards barked orders. Food was shared in secret, and eyes that once held only fear now carried quiet fire. Darren had lit the spark, and though it was still small, it was spreading faster than he expected. But change never goes unseen for long. In the palace of black stone, Queen Zarina sat upon her throne while her council of nobles argued among themselves. Some dismissed the rumors of unrest, calling them lies spread by lazy workers. Others spoke with worry, claiming that workers were refusing to obey without question. Finally, one voice cut through the noise. "It is the human," a noble hissed. "Since his exile into the city, whispers have grown. The workers look to him as if he is a leader. He is not silent. He is dangerous." The queen's violet eyes narrowed. "A single human cannot shake my empire. Yet if these whispers are true, then he must be reminded of his place." She turned to her captain of guards. "Send a patrol into the factories. Make an example of the workers. Let them see what happens when they dare to rise above their chains." The order was carried out quickly. That same evening, Darren was near the factory yard when the sound of armored boots struck the ground. A squad of guards marched in, their weapons glowing with pale energy. The workers froze, their tools dropping in silence. Fear returned to their eyes, but behind it, something else lingered. Hesitation, the memory of Darren's words. The captain of the guards raised his voice. "You have grown bold, thinking yourselves equal to your betters. Today you will learn your place." He pointed at one man in the crowd, the same worker who had once refused extra labor. "You, step forward." The man hesitated, his face pale. He knew what was coming, punishment before all. His knees shook, but before he could move, two others stepped beside him, then a third, then more. Soon nearly a dozen stood at his side, silent but unyielding. The captain sneered. "So you would defy the queen openly? Then you will all suffer." The guards advanced, weapons raised. The workers did not fight, they had no blades, no armor. Yet they did not scatter. They stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes fixed on the enemy. Before the first blow fell, Darren stepped forward. His voice cut across the yard. "Stop!" The guards turned, surprised. The human warrior stood tall, his face calm, his eyes steady. He had no weapon, only his presence, but it carried weight. "This is not strength," Darren said firmly. "It is fear. You strike at the unarmed because you are afraid of their unity. But know this, unity cannot be beaten into silence. The more you strike, the stronger it grows," the captain snarled. "Silence, human!" He lunged forward with his weapon, swinging it at Darren. Darren moved quickly. He caught the shaft of the weapon with both hands and twisted. The strike missed and the guard stumbled. The other soldiers rushed forward, but Darren stood his ground, his body moving with the skill of countless battles. He struck not with killing blows, but with precision, knocking weapons aside, using the guard's strength against them. The workers gasped. For the first time, they saw one of their own stand against the queen's soldiers and win. The fight was brief but fierce. Darren was outnumbered, yet his movements were sharp and controlled. He sent two guards crashing to the ground and disarmed another. By the time the others regained their stance, the workers had begun to move. They did not attack, but they closed ranks around Darren, forming a wall of bodies. The guards looked at the circle of silent faces and hesitated. The captain growled in frustration. "This is not finished!" With a signal, the guards retreated, dragging their fallen with them. The yard fell silent, the echo of boots fading into the distance. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then one worker whispered, "We stood, and they fled." Another raised his head. We are not powerless. The crowd slowly erupted with quiet voices of courage. Fear still lingered, but it was no longer the only thing they felt. They had seen a human warrior defy the Queen's guards, and more importantly, they had stood beside him. Together, they had forced soldiers to retreat. Mira appeared at Darren's side, her face pale but her eyes shining. You have shown them what they did not believe possible. You have shown them that even the Queen's soldiers can fall back. Darren looked around at the faces of the workers. They were still tired, still afraid, but now they held something stronger. This was only the first challenge, he said, quietly. More will come. The Queen will not ignore this. She will strike harder. But remember this moment. Remember how it felt to stand together. That memory is your shield. That night, word spread across the city. From one worker to another, from one alley to the next, the story grew. The guards came, but they were stopped. The humans stood against them. We stood, and we did not fall. In the palace, Queen Zarina listened as her spies delivered the report. Her face remained cold, but her eyes burned with quiet anger. They defied my soldiers, she said softly. They believe they have found strength. It is the human. He is not broken. He is building something in my city. One noble trembled. Shall we send more soldiers, my queen? Crush them with full force before it spreads further? Zarina's lips curved into a thin smile. Not yet. I will not waste armies on whispers. Let the human play his little game. When the time is right, I will strike not at him, but at the hope he feeds. And when that hope dies, they will see how fragile their courage truly is. But deep inside, the Queen felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel: unease. For the first time in her reign, she faced an enemy who fought not with swords or fleets, but with spirit. In the broken streets, Darren walked among the people. Some bowed their heads in respect. Others placed hands on his shoulder as he passed. He accepted none of it with pride. He knew the path ahead would be harder than ever. Yet as he looked at the workers smiling faintly despite their pain, he knew the spark had grown brighter. The Queen had meant to break him by casting him out. Instead, she had given him the stage to light a fire in the hearts of her people, and now, with the first challenge behind them, the fire was beginning to spread, beyond her control. The palace of Queen Zarina glowed under the twin suns, its black spires reaching into the sky. Within its walls, the Queen paced her private chamber. Her violet eyes burned with frustration as she listened to her council of nobles. Reports had come from the factories, the streets, and even the distant neighborhoods. The human warrior, Darren, had not only survived the Queen's punishment, but had begun changing the city from the ground up. They stand taller than before, one noble admitted. They no longer obey without thought. Small groups refuse commands, and some of the soldiers have begun to hesitate when enforcing orders. Zarina's hands clenched. It is the human. He is not merely a prisoner. He has become a symbol. The people see him and believe they can stand. We cannot allow this. The council murmured. Some suggested sending elite forces to crush the movement, while others feared provoking greater unrest. The Queen's expression was hard. Patience, she said firmly. We will not act blindly. Let him continue. Let him believe he has the advantage. Then, when the time is right, we will show him the true power of the Empire. Meanwhile, in the city, Darren moved quietly through the streets. The workers had grown bolder. They no longer cowered entirely. Small acts of defiance continued. A cart refused to stop for soldiers. Whispers passed quickly along alleys, and groups moved supplies without permission. Each act was small, yet together they formed a rhythm of resistance. Darren visited the hidden room Mira had found. More workers had joined, each one cautious but curious. They had begun to trust him, not as a ruler, but as a guide. "Today," Darren said, "we will practice discipline. We will learn to move as one. If the queen strikes, we must act in unity. No one alone can face her soldiers, but together, we are stronger than she imagines." Mira nodded. "They listen to you. Even those who never spoke before follow your words." Darren smiled faintly. "Strength begins in the mind and the heart. Weapons can be taken, but courage cannot." The group practiced silently. They moved through narrow corridors, signaling each other with small gestures. They learned to work as one, passing messages without speaking and watching for guards with sharp eyes. Each step, each practice, made them more confident. Word of these gatherings began to spread. Workers who could not attend still shared what they had learned with neighbors. The network grew quietly, hidden in the alleys and corridors, invisible to the Queen's immediate gaze. Then, one afternoon, a patrol of elite guards entered the district. They were larger than the regular soldiers and carried weapons that glowed brighter than any Darren had seen before. Their captain, a tall alien with sharp features, marched through the streets, searching for signs of rebellion. The workers froze. Fear returned to their eyes, and even Darren sensed the tension. He moved forward calmly, his voice carrying across the yard. "Do not scatter. Stand together. If we show fear, they win before they strike." The elite captain saw Darren and laughed. "So this is the human who thinks he can command our people? He is alone, and he will fall." Darren met the captain's gaze. "I am never alone. You may see one human, but others stand with me." "You may have power, but power alone does not win hearts." The captain sneered and raised his weapon. The other soldiers advanced, ready to crush the small group of workers. But Darren had taught them well. The workers did not flee. They moved, as he had shown them, passing signals silently and closing ranks around each other. They were unarmed, yet their unity made them a wall no single soldier could break. The captain swung his weapon at Darren. Darren moved quickly, catching the edge and twisting it aside. Two guards lunged forward, and he blocked and redirected their strikes, using their own momentum against them. The workers behind him held their ground, and when one soldier tried to push through, a dozen hands stopped him without harming him. The elite soldiers were skilled, but they were unprepared for coordinated defiance. Each time they struck, the workers moved as one, blocking paths and signaling silently. The captain's frustration grew. His orders were ignored. His power seemed useless against people who refused to obey out of fear. Finally, the soldiers retreated, leaving the district in quiet tension. The workers looked at each other, their eyes wide with awe. They had faced elite soldiers and survived without a single death. Mira approached Darren, her voice trembling slightly. "They will not forget today. Even if the Queen sends more, they now know they can resist. You have given them courage beyond what I imagined." Darren nodded. "Courage is just the beginning. Discipline, unity, and hope will carry them further. Each challenge strengthens them, even if they do not yet realize it." At the palace, Queen Zarina heard the news. Her violet eyes narrowed and her lips tightened. They resist. They refuse to bend. The human has done more than survive. He has built a following. The city trembles because of him. A noble spoke quickly. "My queen, we can crush them with an overwhelming force. No one can stand against the full might of the army." Zarina's voice was low and dangerous. "We will wait. Let the human believe he has grown strong. When the time is right, I will show the city the difference between hope and reality. But until then, we watch. Every step, every whisper. He will not escape my gaze." Back in the streets, Darren walked among the workers. Some greeted him with quiet respect. Others simply lifted their heads higher than before. Even those who remained silent felt a subtle change in their spirit. Fear was still present, but it was no longer the master. Confidence, even if fragile, had begun to take root. Darren paused at the top of a small hill overlooking the city. The towers of the palace shone in the sunlight, distant and imposing. He thought of Queen Zarina and her cold rule, and he understood that the next challenge would not be easy. Yet he also understood something more important. The people had seen that even the mightiest empire could be questioned, even from the streets. A single spark had grown into a small flame. It was fragile, but it could not be ignored. Darren whispered to himself, quietly but firmly, "The palace may tremble, but the city is learning to stand. The next challenge will come, and we will be ready." Beneath the glow of the twin suns, the human warrior returned to the alleys and the hidden room. The workers waited, anxious but full of a new quiet courage. Darren met their eyes and smiled faintly. "Rest tonight," he said. "Tomorrow we continue. The queen believes she controls the city, but she does not yet know the strength that rises from the people." The city stirred before sunrise. The streets were quiet, but the air carried tension. The workers had learned to move in silence, to communicate without words, and to watch for signs of danger. They had trained under Darren's guidance, not with weapons, but with discipline, courage, and unity. Today, they were ready for a challenge they did not fully understand, yet felt in their hearts. Darren stood at the edge of the central square. His eyes scanned the streets, counting positions of guards and patrols. He felt the weight of responsibility, yet his spirit remained calm. The queen had underestimated the people. She had thought that casting him out would end resistance, but it had only begun. Mira appeared beside him, her face pale but steady. "They are watching," she whispered. "The queen's soldiers will strike if they see any sign of defiance." Darren nodded. "Then we must show them strength without anger, courage without weapons. Today, they will see what it means to stand united." Workers slowly gathered in hidden corners. Their eyes flicked to Darren for guidance. They had learned to trust him not as a ruler, but as a leader who believed in them. The city had begun to shift quietly, silently, yet powerfully. The first patrol entered the square. Soldiers' boots struck the stone with a sharp rhythm. Their leader, a tall alien with glowing violet eyes, raised a hand. "You there!" he shouted. "Step forward and be counted! You will obey the queen's orders!" The workers did not move. Their eyes met one another, and a signal passed silently. They stood firm, shoulder to shoulder, a wall of quiet defiance. The patrol advanced, but each time they tried to approach, the workers shifted as one, blocking paths without a single word. The patrol leader's face twisted in frustration. "How can this be? They are unarmed!" Darren stepped forward. His voice carried across the square. "You see soldiers, yet you forget the people who make this city live. Without them, your weapons mean nothing. Without their courage, your strength is empty. Today, you will see what happens when fear loses its power." The soldiers hesitated. Their confidence faltered in the face of silent unity. They had never experienced a group so coordinated without orders. Each worker moved instinctively, protecting. Neighbors signaling silently and refusing to scatter. The patrol leader raised his weapon, but Darren met him calmly. With skill and precision, Darren disarmed the captain without harming him. The soldiers froze. Their orders were clear, yet the human warrior had broken their control without a single death. One worker whispered to another, "We can do this. We can stand." The word spread quickly. Workers across nearby streets began to emerge, joining the square. They had no weapons, yet their unity created an invisible wall stronger than any sword. The patrol could not move forward. The city itself seemed to rise behind them. In the palace, Queen Zarina watched from her balcony. Her violet eyes narrowed as reports came in. "They rise without violence," she said softly. The human has not only survived but inspired them. This is more than I anticipated. A noble trembled. My queen, we should crush them immediately. Send the elite guards and the army. Zarina's voice was low but commanding. No, let him continue. Let the people believe they have strength. When they are at their most confident, we will strike, and they will see how fragile their courage truly is. Back in the streets, Darren guided the workers. Do not attack. Do not provoke. Stand tall. Your strength is in unity, not in anger. Today, the city will remember this moment. This is the power the Queen fears most, the courage of people who refuse to bow. The workers followed silently, moving in formation, blocking streets, and protecting one another. Word spread like fire through the alleys and districts. Everywhere, workers began to lift their heads, to move with purpose, and to see themselves as more than shadows. Even some guards hesitated. The human warrior had taught the city a lesson not in blood, but in courage. Fear, once absolute, had begun to crumble. By midday, the city was alive with quiet defiance. The Queen's soldiers found themselves unable to enforce orders. Each group of workers they tried to confront shifted, moved, and resisted without fighting. Their confidence was contagious. The streets that had once echoed with fear now hummed with possibility. Darren moved among the workers, offering guidance and encouragement. Remember this feeling. Remember that you stood together. The Queen may still strike, but nothing can take away the courage you carry inside. Today, the city remembers who holds the true power, the people who make it live. Mira watched him, awe in her eyes. They look at you as more than a human, she whispered. They see hope itself. Darren smiled faintly. Hope is not mine. It is theirs. I only showed them that it exists. At night, the city glowed with alien lights. Workers returned to their homes with a new sense of pride. Even the quietest neighborhoods whispered of the events in the square. Fear had not disappeared, but courage had begun to grow, strong enough to challenge the Queen's rule. Queen Zarina remained in her palace, her expression unreadable. She knew Darren had not only survived, but transformed the city. His exile had been intended as humiliation, but it had become inspiration. For the first time, she faced an enemy she could not easily defeat with weapons or soldiers. Prepare the council, she said finally. The human has changed everything. We will strike soon, but we must be careful. His strength is not in the blade, it is in the hearts of the people. That is a power even I cannot destroy. Darren stood on a high balcony in the hidden district. Looking across the city he had once been cast into as an outcast, he thought of the Queen, of her arrogance, and of the soldiers who had sought to break him. And he thought of the people, small, fragile, yet unyielding in their unity. A human alone cannot conquer an empire, but a united people, guided by courage and hope, could challenge even the strongest ruler. Darren knew this, and so he did not strike. He did not kill. He only prepared, guided, and inspired. The city had been cast into silence, fear, and oppression. Now it breathed with the quiet rhythm of defiance. And the people had learned something that no queen, no army, and no threat could take away. They were not shadows. They were strength. In the weeks that followed, the Queen's attempts to strike failed again and again. Each time she sought to crush hope, it grew stronger. Darren continued to walk among the people, not as a conqueror, but as a guide. He had been expelled from the palace in shame, yet he had returned as the source of courage the Queen had never expected. And so, the human warrior transformed the city without a single act of destruction. He taught the people that strength is not in fear, and power is not in weapons alone. It is in unity, courage, and hope. The city remembered the human who had been cast out, and the queen learned a lesson she could never fully forget. The mightiest. Empire can crumble when it underestimates the courage of those it seeks to control. Darren looked out over the glowing streets, his eyes calm and steady. The city was alive with a new spirit. Its people had learned to stand. Its people had learned to hope. And the warrior who had been expelled from the palace smiled quietly, knowing that sometimes the greatest victories are won not with weapons, but with the heart.